This is Joe Stubblebine from Beyond.com, and I'm next on the RecTech Podcast.
All right, welcome to RecTech, the recruiting technology podcast. The goal of the show is to highlight interesting and HR recruiting technologies, as well as talk to recruiters on how they use that tech to recruit and manage their talent. Today's show will be a vendor edition. My name is Chris Russell. I'm a consultant who helps job boards and HR tech vendors with strategy, marketing, and product development. Now, normally I read the sponsor message next, but since the sponsor of the show is actually our guest today, I'll just introduce him and get on with the show. So Joe Stubblebine, as he said, is the VP of Talent Solutions and Employer Sales at Beyond.com. He's a longtime veteran of the online recruiting industry. For those of you who don't know Joe, he was the founder of JobCircle.com, a regional job board that served the Mid-Atlantic states back in the 2000s. He eventually sold that company to Beyond a few years ago, and he has remained with the company ever since as their VP of Talent Solutions. Joe is also the guy who coined my nickname, the mad scientist of online recruiting. So I'm here to give him his due. And he joins me on the phone now from King of Prussia, PA. What's happening, Joe?
Not much. Very, very exciting times. I'm actually still waiting for my royalty check for coining that name.
Yes, well, I have yet to copyright it, so I should get on that, I guess.
You probably should. Well, I definitely think the name holds up. You are the mad scientist of recruiting. I've always been impressed. I've known you, at least 15, 17 years now?
Something like that.
You're definitely one of the innovators in our space, and I appreciate you having me today as well.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for boosting my personal brand there. So let's get into Beyond and what you guys are up to these days. Let's talk first about the overall market itself. As we go into 2017, Joe, how would you characterize the state of talent acquisition today, especially when it comes to online recruiting?
Well, as you know, it is a very interesting time. Lots of changes, lots of mergers, lots of acquisitions, lots of new models out there, new technologies, new delivery platforms. I know at Beyond we've had some pretty substantial growth rates in our recruitment advertising group. Still very, very strong demand. The market still seems to be very, very tight in a number of areas. So we're pretty positive and optimistic about obviously the demand for recruitment products and services, but also just the influx of new and innovative things that are coming out that are just going to make us even more efficient as a delivery system and platform for recruiters to help them find talent.
Yeah. Joe, as things tighten up next year in terms of, less talent available, I mean, that's a good sign for anybody in online recruiting, right, in terms of how to reach those candidates, I think.
Well, I think it's challenging, obviously, because you've got to work a little harder to move them from a job they're already at, since there's just generally less folks available, and as folks continue to retire and move out of the available pool of candidates, it makes it a little more difficult, which is probably a good lead-in, I guess, with regard to texting. I mean, I think there's new ways to try and reach out to folks, and I think that's where recruiters are looking to try and get to those folks first, just to make sure that they can continue to fill those available jobs. Yeah,
so basically employers they're going to have to spend more, too, right, to find these people? Overall?
I think so, and I think we're seeing a diversification of spend across the marketplace. Obviously, as you know, there's tools and technologies that exist now that never did in the past, and so I think there's still a migration, perhaps, of some spend from some of the traditional large-scale legacy job boards into newer software and recruitment and delivery platforms, as well as increasing tools, throughout the entire funnel with regard to onboarding and pre-screening and all of the various components that it takes to bring someone on board. So I think in a lot of ways there's definitely more effectiveness of cost, because even with the advent of performance advertising on the job posting side of the business, I think customers are getting more efficient with their spend, but certainly needing to diversify that spend across a number of different mediums and platforms.
Gotcha. Joe, you've been in the business for a long time. What are employers still doing wrong these days when it comes to attracting talent, in your opinion?
Wow, that's a great question. I think that probably the biggest challenge, and I know speaking from, I manage a team of a number of folks here, and we talk to thousands of recruiters on a monthly basis. I think just helping recruiters understand to try and work with some of these new platforms and technologies, there are still a fair number of folks that just love to buy job postings and resume search, or simply really won't get aggressive enough with spending the recruitment dollars they need to quickly fill those open positions. So I think probably one of the big limiting factors I see is just convincing recruiters to try new tools and technologies. There is programmatic, there's interstitial display. Certainly text recruitment is growing very rapidly, and just helping them understand that, hey, some of the old models, while they certainly work very well, there may be newer ways to actually reach out to candidates more rapidly so you can help get that job filled.
All right. Well, let's talk about text and recruiting. So Listeners Beyond has a unique offering now in the online recruiting space, and if you're an employer or recruiter listening to this, you can get 10% off their Text2Hire messaging service by going to beyond.com/rectech and signing up there. So, Joe, very few companies, I think, are offering recruit by text as a phrase here. Is texting the new way to find talent?
I'm not sure if it's the new way to find talent, but it's probably the newest way to reach talent rapidly, right? I mean, These are the same folks. When we execute text campaigns for our customers, these are the same folks that have been members of Beyond for a while. Beyond actually has about 54 million members, and we've been around since, I think, 1998. We are definitely one of the larger players in the space, and I think that we've had these folks in as members for a while, and a few years back we decided to see if perhaps some of these job seekers that had mobile devices would be interested in receiving job alerts via text and various other pieces like that. So it was sort of fortunate by accident, I guess, that we were able to, over the last 3 or 4 years, build a very large database of opt-in cell phones. And so recently we tapped into some technologies that allowed us to be able to start, communicating, allowing our employers to directly communicate with folks in our that are already members. And I mean, the response rates have just been incredible for us. So I'm not sure if it's a new location or it's just maybe a new delivery system that just isn't as cluttered as a job posting. I mean, Beyond has probably, I don't know, a few million job postings on our site, and obviously I'm sure get your email box filled with lots of spammy type of emails. So there isn't many new delivery mediums now that offer the ability that texting does, because it's so new, and a lot of employers are just now trying to figure out how to leverage texting for recruitment.
Yes, it really makes the job stands out when it's sent by text. So how does it work, Joe? What's the actual user experience like for the employer? I mean, do they go and do this themselves? Do you do it for them? And what happens on the job seeker side when they get the text?
Sure. So the way it works is when we have a customer that's interested in texting, we obviously run a people search on them, and we find out how many opt-in members that we have that have provided us a cell phone and have given us explicit permission to opt in to text them for the purposes of recruitment, which is very critical. And we then provide a quote back to the customer. They decide whether it makes sense for them. And most of the campaigns tend to be fairly small, 100, 200, 250 people. It doesn't need to be large like emails. I think that was one of the biggest things we had when we first started selling this back in February, was a lot of our sales folks were saying, well, it's not an email blast with 10,000 people. How's it going to work? Yeah. But because of the high level of engagement of text messaging, a small campaign to 150 people can yield almost better results than an email campaign to 5,000 people. Once that happens, the customer decides they're interested. We actually have a text delivery platform that we use to actually allow the recruiter to help construct the messaging and queue up the list, and then we push a button, send it out, and then active engagement happens. It's actually a two-way conversation. So the recruiter's sitting at a desktop, and the text blast may go out to 300 people, and as those folks receive that message on their cell phone, they can text back, and the recruiter sort of, almost like in a chat window with them, and have active, open dialogue with a number of folks concurrently. And we actually partnered with TextRecruit as our delivery platform for this. So it's it's been a great partnership. And then at the end, we've got metrics, and we know open rates and engagement rates and click-through rates. And usually, what happens, they keep coming back and buying more and more of them. So it's a fairly simple process. So it's not like the recruiter sitting there on their own cell phone, having text dialogue. Right. There's a system that manages that, and we train the customer and help them with the message and how to sort of, manage the engagement. Okay.
How long do they sit there for that? I mean, what's the is it like an hour, or do you?
We as a guideline, we tend to say for every 100 candidates, plan to spend about 30 minutes. that was another big hurdle for us because we have a lot of recruiters that just simply like to post a job and kind of push applicants into an ATS, or they want to send an email and ask the job seeker to click an apply URL. But with texting, in order for it to be effective, it has to be a one-to-one conversation. You're not competing with 4 million jobs. You're just simply having a dialogue with that targeted, precise candidate that you are hoping to get in for an interview. Mm-hmm. And from that perspective, you need to be prepared to spend some time sitting in front of the PC or on the mobile device and having a dialogue with those people.
Okay, so all right, so you've identified the say 100, 200 people that you're targeting. Let's call them, I don't know, nurses for now. But so when they get that first text from Beyond, what does it say? Give us some background there.
Sure. Well, actually, it comes from the employer themselves. We actually localize the phone number to where we're targeting the campaign, and if that employer writes back, it actually goes into the platform that we use for delivery, and the recruiter just simply has a dialogue from that. Many times the language might be, hey, we saw your resume on Beyond. We'd love to talk to you about an open job. If you get a chance, maybe we could chat for a few minutes. Do you have any times that work for you, or something along those lines? Very casual.
So you're aiming for a conversation first, not just hey, would you click this link?
Absolutely. I think when you think about style is important with your text messaging because if you obviously the way you text your children or perhaps your wife or your boss, it is a different style of communication, but it tends to be more casual and relaxed. I think the biggest key is those recruiters, because texting is instantaneous. If a job seeker texts you back, you really don't want to make them wait 6-9 hours, right? You want to be able to, instantly say, "Hey, great, thanks for getting back to me. How does next Tuesday at 4 o'clock look?" Or, "Do you mind? Here's my email. Can you just shoot me off a resume real quick?" Mm-hmm. Because again, it's targeted and precise, and the numbers are small with regard to the audience, but if you have 100 Java people and you're trying to fill a senior-level Java J2EE job, you would love to have conversations right now with 11 people, right, that are qualified because you've already filtered them through the keyword pools that you've done on our database. Mm-hmm. So you want to move them instantly into a conversation interview, and then from that point forward, figure out do you have them go through the ATS process or move them further into your hiring funnel at that point.
Give us some stats. What kind of things do you track on this? Open rates, engagement. How do you?
Yeah, sure. So it was interesting. When we first started playing around with this, we did a survey on Beyond to our own job seekers, and we found that about 73% of job seekers said they are very open to receiving job opportunities via text, as well as having employers contact them via text for opportunities.
Wow, that's pretty big.
Yeah, it's a very big number, and I don't know if you're familiar with the statistics, but about 78% of all mobile users actually check their phones within the first hour of waking up. I tend to not be one of them because my phone is usually work for me, and actually 74% of job seekers use a mobile device in their job search already. And another little fun statistic is that McCann Worldwide did a study that 53% of 16 to 22-year-olds would actually rather give up their sense of smell than give up their technology devices, which kind of shows you where this overall platform is going as an effective recruitment tool. When we push that button, we see on average about a total engagement rate of about 45%, which means multiple messages going back and forth, and a unique human engagement rate of about 15%, which is pretty incredible. Text has about a 99% open rate, and overall, 15-17% unique response rate, as compared to email, which is about a 17-20% open rate, 3% click to send, and much less engagement because you have them, and most text messages are read within the first minute after being received.
Yeah. So when it comes to kind of rules around this, what do you advise the recruiter to do? What can and can't they say in terms of how to engage the job seekers once they do get them live there?
Well, I guess you have a couple rules even before you send the text message, right? You want to make sure that you're working with a list, regardless if you're using Beyond or certainly your own applicant tracking system, or if you're acquiring a list, that the person you're texting must have explicitly opted in to receive text messages from you. You can never send anything that's of a solicitory nature. I don't know if you remember the case where Papa John's had actually sent about 500,000 text messages to some of their patrons without prior permission. They actually settled for about $16.5 million with the FCC, but it is an area where you want to make sure that the list of folks that you're texting, you truly have explicit opt-in permission for the purposes of whatever your message is going to be, and in this case, it's recruitment advertising. So that's really key. And I think once you start to engage them, your messaging should be clear and casual and precise. We find that actually we generally discourage our customers from actually even putting in a URL. Some customers will say, hey, we have a great open house next week. You want to click here? That can work to drive foot traffic, but other than that, if you're putting it, hey, I've got a job posting for you, Chris. When you get a chance, click on it and check it out. It's not as personal.
Well, so what happens then after, how do they know that person's qualified?
Well, they don't necessarily know they're qualified, but they know because the folks were emailing. They've already said, hey, I'm looking for RNs, subacute and long-term. They need to live within 10 miles of this hospital, and we would like if they work for this competitor, right? So they can get fairly specific. Open house promotions using this method is really, really great because you can drive a lot of foot traffic in the door. But because we have a full resume on them, we can look in and say, do they have tube feeding skills? Have they dealt with gunshot wounds in a Trauma One care center, or whatever the skill sets might be? Do they have Ruby on Rails experience? That resume gives us the ability to at least filter down so that the audience should have a higher level of sort of baseline qualification than just doing a broad, email blast.
Okay.
So we know that if the dialogue starts, and it can even be a question like, hey, I saw your resume on Beyond.com, or I saw your resume on my applicant tracking system. I saw you had some Java skills. Do you also know how to install these modules as well, right? It becomes a conversation. Yeah, I do. Would you be interested in maybe considering, a new opportunity, or however that dialogue flows for that recruiter?
So do you guys then give the recruiter access to the resumes or profiles from Beyond that you actually targeted in that case?
That's actually something we're planning on in the future. The way we do it now is because we don't have the ability to sell our names. What we do is when you see the list in the system, the first name the last name and the cell phone are blacked out, right? And when the job seeker chooses to engage back with the employer, at that point we unlock the full name of the job seeker. Obviously, we have very strict privacy rules with our data, so that's one of the requirements that we had with our delivery partner. But we currently don't at this time link back so you can review the resume of the conversation was unlocked because we're actually delivering it through a third party text delivery system. But we've actually discussed that as perhaps a future point. But in reality, if you're having a conversation, you'd like that person's resume to be like, hey, I'd love to see if I might be able to get a more updated version of your resume. Do you mind, shooting that over to me, or just, attaching that and firing it off via email? So again, it's just part of the conversation, just like if you met somebody in a hallway, right? Yeah.
All right. A few more questions for you, Joe. What's your success story, one success story out of this you would like to share with the audience?
Well, we've had a lot of them. I mean, it's really, I know that sounds sort of salesy, but I guess probably one of the first campaigns we did with our Text2Hire product was it was actually through an agency. It was a large healthcare system, and KRT, which is a pretty large boutique programmatic and new media agency in California. They had purchased a text campaign to test for, it was something like necrophic nurses or some very, very difficult thing, and we maybe had 300 or so people in that region, and they were actually able during that campaign. They were able to make 5 hires on extremely minimal investment. It was not very much at all. Single campaign. I think it was 332 candidates result in 5 hires. So we knew at that point, like, wow, this is really, really powerful stuff. Yeah. And they've gone on to really support us with a lot of different campaigns for healthcare, customer service, sales. I think the first 25 campaigns, and now they're and still are now averaging about a 41.5% total engagement rate. So it's been a really new way that I think a lot of the larger companies have been starting to really adapt and think about and embrace. So I think the success is always in the repeat, and we have a number of accounts that are continuing to buy, mostly in healthcare and IT and customer service, although it really doesn't matter what industry, right?
Yeah.
Everybody has a cell phone in their hand.
Exactly. Well, it's definitely it's a very unique product, I think, in the marketplace, and in this kind of very noisy world, it's a excellent way to stand out, in my opinion. Not saying that's because you're a sponsor, but it's definitely unique in that respect. I don't think there's anybody else doing something like this online right now. So it's
not to my knowledge. I mean, there's definitely some interesting texting platforms out there. Like I said, we chose TextRecruit as our partner, but Trumpia has an interesting solution. TextUs is actually growing pretty rapidly within the staffing environment because staffing has some different high volume needs than perhaps traditional corporate does. But overall, I'm not aware. Just because I'm not aware doesn't mean it exists. I don't know if any of the larger players are doing it. I think we're probably in an interesting and unique positions because we do have 5.1 million opt-in cell phones, and that's just a really, really big database. So I haven't heard of anyone else that has that available pool of inventory. It's about 10 to 12% of our total database, and we're working now actively to change that, obviously, through our own registration path and doing marketing efforts and going back to folks. We have, I guess, 25 million resumes in our database, so if you think 5.1 million opt-in cell phones, there's still almost 20 million folks that have not provided us a cell phone or have not given us permission to use it for recruitment. So, we're actively working on campaigns now to increase that number because we think it's beneficial for job seekers as well. It's a great way to, you've been in the space as long as I have. How many times you've heard a job seeker complain that they never get to talk live with a recruiter?
Yeah.
This obviously alleviates that pain point for them.
Interesting stuff, Joe. So, final question: where's my invite to your boats? I want to go on the Chesapeake.
Well, right now, unfortunately, it's actually up on land, all shrink wrapped up. But of course, the boat payments don't stop during the wintertime. I keep convincing our CEO, Rich Milgram, if we can just open up a St. Petersburg office, I'd be happy to go open it, and then I can
sort of
build
a Beyond
all year
boat,
round.
Get put a wrap on there, and you can make an expense for the company.
That's exactly. It's Chris. You think the same way I did. I said, if I stick a Beyond sticker on this thing, can I maybe charge off all the drinks and the cocktails on the boat? And they sort of obviously killed that idea pretty quickly.
All right. Well, Joe Stubblebine from Beyond, thanks for joining me today.
Well, thank you, Chris, for having me. I appreciate it. And have a fantastic holiday season.
Awesome. And where can people follow you? On Twitter?
Twitter.com, Joe Stubblebine, and I'm certainly on LinkedIn under Joe Stubblebine as well. Or you can go to beyond.com/Joe Stubblebine to get my career portfolio on Beyond.
That's going to do it for this edition of the RecTech Podcast. Thanks again to our sponsor. And remember, check out beyond.com/RecTech for that special 10% off to their Text2Hire service. Follow me on Twitter at Chris Russell or visit rectechmedia.com. You can find the audio and links for this show on our blog. Thanks for listening, everyone.